I'm Neil Marks, and we're continuing to get perspectives on the report submitted today by the Chief Elections Officer to the Chair of the Guyana Elections Commission. We can now talk with Ruel Johnson, one-time politician, now resigned himself to journalism at Kaieteur News, where he is an editor. Ruel, thank you very much for coming in.
Yeah, thanks, sir.
First, try to be modest in describing the report today submitted by Lowenfield to the Chair of the Elections Commission.
Modest or honest? It's a ludicrous.
Low cost, that's what I mean.
I'm trying best not to, but it's absurd. It goes beyond the mandate, I think, that such a report is supposed to do. It goes as far as not simply offering the tabulation, the calculation of the votes, etc., and reporting it, but it offers alternate tabulation based on unproven allegations made by the coalition, and puts it down to a calculation that shows 125,000 valid votes for the coalition and 56,000 votes for the PPP, which grossly contorts the actual votes as certified in the recount by GCOM's own processes.
Are you surprised that all of that was contained in the observation report? What's your understanding of what a summary should be?
No, well, I'm not surprised. You've had the signpost laid time and time again. When you see Basil Williams, for example, was saying that the only valid reports were the declarations held in abeyance, and there was the very specific process of using words like invalid, etc., during the recount, and making sure that those words were incorporated into the observation reports. And then you had a little graphics about 127,000 votes and 200,000 votes are not valid, etc. That was rhetoric, that was language that was meant to put itself into the report. Now the Constitution says, 177, that the chair shall declare the winner of an election, the person who has more votes, acting on advice of the Chief Elections Officer. Now, what we have is a contorted perspective of that process, according to 177, within the report. You have the certified votes from the recount, which show one thing, which is what the Chief Elections Officer is supposed to reflect. Then you have his alternate calculation that shows a flipping of that is dependent upon the disenfranchisement of the majority of people who voted. So in an election in which over, my calculation is about almost 500,000 people voted, you have only 170.
I think they said 297,000 thereabouts votes were affected by the anomalies.
And the calculation that Lowenfield has shows about only 170-something thousand valid votes, and this is based upon unproven allegations that have made their way into the report.
Could a substantial block of these allegations be proven true, as you've been reporting on it at Kaieteur?
Oh, well, I can say this without fear of contradiction. Every single opportunity we've had to pursue an allegation of fraud, as responsible journalists, we have pursued them. We have not found any single credible allegation of voter fraud from dead people or people who overseas voting. Now, what people need to understand, you have to prove two things. So if you're claiming that a dead person has voted, you have to prove, one, that the person is in fact dead. Two, the person is proven to have voted. You have no evidence of that. And we've pursued every single case. We've had example of people who have been proven dead, but we don't have any example of those dead people having been proven as voted. We've had examples of people who they claim to have died, who were not in fact dead. As you've covered in your most recent mini documentary, we've had multiple examples of people who they claim to have been out of the country and have voted, who were in fact not out of the country. Some people don't even have passports. But based on, and this is something that has to be investigated after the elections, based on information coming out of the Department of Immigration, you have what purports to be records of Guyanese who have never left the country, having left the country, and not coming back in. That is falsified information. People are saying that, oh, the people need to go and prove that they came back into the country. How do you prove that you came back in the country if you never left the country in the first place? And how is it that the immigration office is recording people who have supposed to have left the country illegally, and them not coming back? It doesn't make sense. You have to report them having left legally and not coming back. And the passports that you've seen, likely, and we've seen, have shown that on the dates that these people were supposed to have left, there was no record in the passport. And these are current passports. And you had some ludicrous charges. You had one departure record given at the counting center, in which you had a man being reported to have left the country at a precise date and time, down to the second. Now, who records that on an immigration form? I left Guyana at 9:56.26 seconds in the morning. Nobody records that. So, yeah.
So, all of these were made up?
As far as we know, they were spuriously made. There was a clear case of, we call free training the allegations and making sure they all get. And what was unfortunate, and what in fact may be criminal, is that it is that sort of free training of allegations, unproven, has made it into the Chief Election Officer's constitutional actors report. Now, we have to go back to what the chair herself said. She said, he who asserts must prove. Now, allegations have been made. At no point in time has there been any investigation to prove what those allegations are. So how it is that you are, without proof, disenfranchising the bulk of the electorate in your report?
In your editorial today, I believe it was, do you believe that the president is behind all of this as leader of APNU plus AFC?
Oh, he claims so. He owned in his interview last night
On Ben's Shop Radio.
on Bench Shop Radio, he owned the allegations, as spurious as they are. He has said in the past that the buck stops with him essentially. When it is that Barcelona made a claim, which he didn't deny specifically. He said, I'm the leading party. Now, we have two options. It's either he is the leading party and is directing it, which he has asserted last night, or he has been led down a path, and to save face, he is retroactively claiming the absurd allegations made by his juniors.
What do you suggest he do?
Huh?
What do you suggest the president do at
Be
this
truthful.
point?
At this point, be truthful. One thing we seem to be forgetting is this. It's a very basic thing. And this is where GCOM itself is acting strangely. There are original statements of poll in the possession of both the chair and the chief elections officer.
You're hoping the chair has them.
Well, she should. It would be strange if after all this time she does not have those original SOPs. The CEO should have those original SOPs. Those are not documents owned by the CEO. Those are public documents held by the CEO in the public trust. The fact that you put them out on in public in the polling stations means that they're meant to be public documents. It's only incidental that, I was part of a small party, non-party media, but we hadn't had a resource nationwide to gather all. But in theory, they should be put into the public domain and they should be factored into GCOM's processes, including the recount. If the recount had gone, how a recount should go on site in a different circumstances, according to the law. What you should have, I have had ideally, is that you have the SOPs displayed next to the SORs for each instance. The fact that this is not being done is extremely curious. So, from regions 1 through 10, with the exception of 4, the statements of recount, the total the certified recounts, match the previously declared numbers. And we've seen an example of SOPs, etc. In region 4, the final total does not match the Mingo declared declarations, which are about 100 or so votes in tandem with each other. Now, what we are forgetting, or what we are being encouraged to forget, is that twice the government signed off on those Mingo declarations. Those Mingo declarations were then claimed by government people to have matched the SOPs in their possession. So by now, the recount should be disqualified, not simply by virtue of allegations, etc. It should be disqualified also if it is in fact incorrect by the SOPs in the possession of GCOM, which means Chair, who should have copies, and Lowenfield, who should have copies. The fact that we are discarding those original SOPs is ludicrous. Then there's another aspect of it. CARICOM had a role in this. We don't know at this point what role is the CARICOM Observer's report. But I suspect if it is we go down the path of taking as credible the current CEO's report, it will be at odds with the CARICOM report. And we have a very simple indication of that. The CEO's report, and I should say this, you'll see a full analysis in tomorrow's edition of Kaieteur News.
Sure. Plug away.
But the CEO's report is in essence showing that the entire GCOM infrastructure, that people were trained to the tune of billions of taxpayer dollars, is so hopelessly corrupt and incompetent as to produce such an egregiously flawed report.
And an indictment on Mingo, on
Lowenfield himself. It is an indictment on every single facet. Lowenfield, Myers, down to Mingo, all of them. It is an indictment of the police officers who were present in the booths. It was an indictment of every single scrutineer, observer, every single party agent who was in the booth, including hundreds, if not thousands, of coalition party. I think it's basically saying that thousands of Guyanese were involved in a criminal and incompetent conspiracy, but that somehow still has not produced any credible direct evidence of the conspiracy itself.
That doesn't make any sense.
It makes no sense.
So, should the Commission discard the summary of the observation reports and only work with the tabulation of the recount, which Lowenfield seems to have gotten right? Like all the results from the certificates match the general tabulation that he's produced.
Yeah, we've think. Now, there are two options before you. You either go with the certified tabulation, or you go with the Lowenfield math. Now, the certified tabulation, which was a process observed by all, including CARICOM observers, etc., full scrutiny, more or less, of the people. The next logical step is declaration. Certified, was it term they used? Something's not validation.
Verification.
Or something else. Oh, I'm sorry, life. Anyway, the next step is you certify. I guess you effectively, I don't know the term validation, But essentially, the next step is declaration. The next effective step is declaration.
I was going to ask you how you read the order, because it says Lowenfield submits this report.
Yeah.
GCOM has 3 days to consider it.
Yeah.
And then they have to determine whether they will ask him to do another report. Do you see in that an option that they have to just don't ask him for a report and just go ahead and make a declaration?
Certainly. The Constitution basically says, and this is where we add in layers, but at this point in time, GCOM being a self-determining body and all other, the Constitution then says they submit, if there's a list of candidates, two or more listed candidates, the list that gets more
Wins.
Now wins. The chair then, in keeping with a report made by the CEO, then declares the winner. No, after a meeting with the commission, So what is next should happen is that the chair should meet with the commission. The chair should then consider who had more. Now, precisely because the observation reports consist of numbers that have not, and allegations that have not been investigated, and GCOM cannot investigate, and quite frankly, the surrounding circumstance, including in our reporting, and your reporting as well, in which you've seen exposures of clear lies related to what is on the observation report, then GCOM should say, these are what the certified numbers are, we will make a declaration, and then you declare a winner, and then the election petition comes afterwards. Certainly, we have to reform our laws, in which an election petition doesn't take 10 years when we have a 5-year electoral cycle. Now, the absurd argument is being made that, let's say we take that alternate thing where the coalition wins 125,000 votes and the PPP wins 56,000, disenfranchising on an unprecedented level, 200,000 plus people, voters. Let's say you take that as a thing. There is no next constitutional step in which you go from that conjectural number to declaration. Because if you do that, Lowenfield would effectively have adumbrated the powers of counting agents, observers, supervisors, tabulation aides, supervisors, and the GCOM chair onto himself, produced a number that the GCOM chair essentially has to rubber stamp. And it's an absurd number. 100 and something thousand people out of 400,000 valid votes cast, even with Mingo's numbers. It doesn't make sense.
So, Ruel, this really is on Justice Singh.
Everything is on Justice Singh. And at this point, I think it's safe to say, with all due respect to her, there are 2 pathways. There is logic and order, and there's just plain absurd insanity. And the insanity is in that alternate figure.
Thank you very much, Ruel.
No problem.
We were talking with Ruel Johnson, editor at the Kaieteur News, on the report submitted today by the Chief Elections Officer to the chair of GCOM. As we've been reporting, the Elections Commission has 3 days to consider the report submitted by Mr. Lowenfield, and then a declaration should follow that. We'll keep you updated on all the perspectives coming out of the remaining days, hopefully, of the electoral process in Guyana.